Dave Fox Home Remodeling Show with your host, Bryce Jacob, on 610 WTVN.
All right, good morning. It's another beautiful morning here in Columbus, Ohio. Welcome to the Dave Fox Home Remodeling Show. This is Bryce Jacob, your host. And last week we had a great show for you. If you missed that, you want to definitely go to davefoxradio.com and listen to that, because we had a lot of good tips on things that you can do to your home to really prevent some of those unexpected costs, get things ready for winter. A lot of you had great caller questions, and the hour just flew by. I couldn't believe how quickly it went because we had so many good caller questions, and we ended up getting a lot of email interest during the week, continuing those wonderful questions. And I prepared you this week that we're going to take more of your calls today on a different topic, though, relating to the outside, getting into the garden. Got a couple guests back with me this morning that have been here. They were here in the spring getting us ready for our gardens to look great, and our landscaping to really take shape over the summer. And hopefully you've took some of those tips from our guest that's back. I've got Bill Gerhardt here. He's the president of Greenscapes Landscape Company, and he's here with Mark Moore. He's also from Greenscapes Landscape Company. Great to have you guys back.
Morning.
Morning.
Thank you.
Of course, yeah. It's always great to have you guys here. Now, I can't believe the seasons have gone as quickly as they have here, because it seems like you were just in here. You were getting us ready for spring, and it's fall.
It's hard to believe how quickly the weather changed.
Yeah, well, it did. It seems like we didn't even get much of a fall. We had fall, but it seems like it just all of a sudden got real cold here, like this morning.
all my flowers froze back, and the perennials are starting to look like they're done for the year. Yeah. Well, I still have my hanging ferns out on my front porch, which they've probably kicked it by now. So I'm going to switch them out with ghosts this afternoon and get ready for trick or treat this week. So you guys, we've got a lot of things on tap here for today. I know there's a lot of good subject matter, and I'm going to throw the number out because we'll take your calls as soon as you want to dial in. So the number here is 821 WTVN, or 821-9886. Outside the area, 800-610-9886. So one more time, 821-9886 or 800-610-9886. So feel free to give us a call, ask these guys any questions about getting your garden ready for winter here, which seems like it just came with the frost on the windshields and everything. And in the meantime, while we're waiting for you to hit us with your questions, guys, what's going on? What should we be thinking about right now? Well, it's still fall, and there's still a lot of time to plant trees and shrubs. A lot of people always ask us, hey, aren't you shutting down for the season? And really at Greenscapes, we're just getting going into fall. It's a great time to dig trees and shrubs. The availability is really good at your garden centers and through your local landscape contractor. So it's the reason it's a good time to plant right now, because you can get the plant in. The plant is dormant. It's not using energy. It's not using water right now as much. And you can get the plant in the ground, and it will still continue to grow roots even throughout the winter. And this is very important. So the plant, is ready in the spring, and, it takes off, and you have a beautiful plant.
Well, that's good to know, because my wife bought a whole bunch of boxwoods, and hopefully she's listening right now, that have been sitting out in front of our house. We've periodically been watering and have not planted. So I think I know what she can get started on this morning here once we get home from church. So if the doors are not, the locks aren't changed by the time I get home here. So hopefully we've got boxwood duty today. So that's good to know. How about grass? Can you plant grass seeds still? Or
Dave, can I touch on that? With the evergreens, you do want to continue watering them until we do get a complete freeze, because they will have a tendency to dry out quickly. So you want to make sure that you keep them wet throughout the fall growing season until winter truly is here. Otherwise, you will end up with a brown, dead boxwood. So,
well, that's good to know.
And Mark is speaking as a true arborist, and he was a city forester for 30 years.
Down in Bexley, isn't that correct? Okay.
Yeah.
Those of you that remember that from our spring show, yeah, you've got a good one there that knows an awful lot about trees. We talked a lot about the beetles and bugs that infest our trees in the spring. So
and the trees have been under assault. You had the emerald ash borer wipe out all the ash. You've had the imprellis damage from the herbicide that killed a lot of evergreen trees throughout our community.
So there are a lot of people right now looking for replacement trees. And we might want to touch on that too, is what are some varieties of trees that are better, more carefree?
Well, why don't I ask that question? What are some trees that are a better variety and carefree? I love it. The finger points to Mark here.
Let the horse go.
Here in the central Ohio area, just about any of the oak trees are very, very good trees to grow. We have quite a few platanus, the London Plains, almost all the acers, which would be sugar maples, red maples, the Freeman maples. There's a whole laundry list of trees that you could grow here in Ohio that some people are willing to expand and try. I mean, there's Kentucky coffee tree, there's golden chain trees, there's Carolina Halesia, which is the silver bell tree.
Okay, so other than the fancy names of some of these trees, what are the benefits of some of these trees?
There are anything from ornamental to full-size shade trees that just contribute lots of beauty, lots of diversity to central Ohio. So the more diverse you are, the less likely we are to have infestations of insects and things like that. So it's just important to look around your property. This time of year, as trees are going dormant, you're looking for storm damage to prune out. You're looking for insects that are trying to winter over. So it's a great time. I mean, these are things that we're doing at Greenscapes every day. If you live in an area where you have ornery deer, it's a good time to start thinking about protection as far as that. There's quite a few sprays that you can get at your garden centers. You can use corrugated plastic around younger trees so that the deer don't rub their antlers on them.
Do they also chew the bark?
They don't chew the bark.
Okay.
Typically, if you see bark chew, it's mice doing that, particularly lower around the mulch rings. If you have bark missing higher up, that's usually the bucks rubbing their antlers on the... So that's where, like, the corrugated plastic around the trunks. We protect all the trees at Greenscapes with corrugated plastic so that they're ready to go when we're going out to do landscaping. So.
Okay. Mark, a couple of the other faster-growing shade trees people always want because they've lost a nice tree. Can you talk about, like... I know the maples grow fast. I particularly like Sienna Glen. And then some of the elms, there's probably 50 different varieties of elms. Elms are an extremely fast-growing tree. Maybe talk about a few varieties that you've seen and have used and like.
Well, the lacebark elm is a phenomenal tree. It gives you great winter interest because of the desiccating bark. And the discoloration of the bark during the winter time, and then come springtime, you get this almost like it almost gives you a fall color in the spring when it leaves out because it has a reddish hue, and then they turn sharply green, and then again you turn around in the fall and you have that great fall color of yellows and reds. Probably my favorite tree out there is the shingle oak. It doesn't have much fall color, but the leaves hang on. They blow in the wind. It is a full-size shade tree with some dampled shade, but it has a phenomenal shape. Fast-growing oak will grow just about anywhere here in the central Ohio area.
This is why I brought him, so he could use a term like dampled shade.
Yeah, I don't even know what that is, but I want to try that shade.
I don't even know what it is, but I'm going to plant a tree and look outside to see if I'm getting dampled shade.
I want to put my hammock under dampled shade. It just sounds right.
When you talk about dampled shade, what you're referring to is it a full shade tree where I have to stick with shade-loving shrubs and flowers, or is it something that has a little more open branch structure like the London Plains or the shingle oaks or the locust tree where I can still plant some sun-loving shrubs and perennials that will still thrive throughout the entire season. So that's what dampled shade.
All right. Well, that's good. I like the explanation, and thank you. I'm sure our listeners are like, okay, cool. I've had dampled shade all my life and didn't even know it. Well, on that note, we're going to take a real quick break, and when we come back, you want to stay tuned here because we're going to give you some of those tips of things that you can do just around the garden, some things with perennials, if there's bulbs that you have that you've planted or you're thinking of planting, whether it's the right time to do that. So stay tuned with us. We'll be right back. You're listening to Dave Fox Home Remodeling Show. We'll be back after just a couple seconds here. Good morning. We're back, and you're listening to the Dave Fox Home Remodeling Show. This is Bryce Jacob, your host. We're having a great morning this morning. We're talking trees and plants. I've got Bill Gerhardt and Mark Moore, both of them from Greenscapes Landscape Company. And we've had a gentleman waiting patiently here. Mac has been on the line here waiting as we went to break. And you got questions about pine trees. Is that right, Mac?
Yes. I recently lost a white pine. I live in a condominium, and the association told me that I could only replace the tree with the one that was already there. I'm kind of hesitant to put another white pine in the same area where this one just kind of got brown and just died. And I just really don't know what to do. Do you have any suggestions?
Well, Mac, I'll tell you, those darn condo associations. Let's hear what Mark has to say. He's chiming up here. So what do you think, Mark?
Mac, when that pine tree passed on, was it just like overnight? Did it look like it just died?
Yes, it went fairly quick, but I got two other pine trees almost right beside them, and they're fine.
Okay. Most likely what happened is you probably had some kind of borer get into the trunk, and the other two were able to fend it off. So to replace it with another Pinus strombus would not be an issue at all. When you removed that one, you took all the issues with it. So what you could do is do a pH test in the soil just to make sure that there's no issues there. But other than that, you shouldn't have any issues.
Great.
How do you do a pH test, Mark? Where do you go to get
Thank you.
test kit?
You can either go to a local garden center and get a test kit, or you can actually send out a soil sample to, there's a couple labs. There's CLC in Westerville, and then there's OSU Extension Service that you mail it into them. It's a nominal fee, and then within about 2-3 weeks, they'll send you back your results, and then you'll know what your pH is, what other micronutrients are in the soil, and if it's actually a good location for those. But obviously, if you have two there that are thriving and doing well, it probably isn't a soil issue, but it was probably an insect problem or possibly even a disease. But like I said, when you remove the old one, you pretty much took all those problems with it.
All right. Well, good. Well, thanks for answering that. And Mark, I've got a quick question for you just about the soil that we have in Central Ohio. Is this really good planting soil? I come from Charlotte, North Carolina, where I lived, and the soil's red. It's clay. You dig down about an inch, and it would be like trying to dig through pottery in many cases. So how does Central Ohio compare?
Central Ohio soils we have about 3 distinct different soils. There are some loomy areas, particularly in the river zones. And then you get into the plateaus where the soil becomes clay, and it can become hard pan in drought conditions and things. But if you do the right soil conditioning, like this time of year is a perfect time. If you have a bad spot in your yard, take your mulched up leaves and grass and turn it into that soil and get it prepped for next year's plantings and things. It's fine. But pH wise, we're pretty well balanced. There are some areas that might be a little higher in acid, which is good for most trees and shrubs. But then if you're trying to grow grass, you actually want to have an alkaline soil. So that's the point of doing the pH test, is to see where it is. If it's a balanced soil, you can pretty much grow anything. If it's somewhere around 6.5, you're talking trees, shrubs, perennials. If it's 7 to 7.5, then you're talking grasses. So
gotcha. Okay. Well, I just learned more this morning than I probably do in a week of work, so I might just take next week off here.
There you go.
So thanks. Let me throw that number out to you again. We're taking your calls this morning. It's 821-9886. Again, 821-9886 or 800-610-9886. I've got a question for you real quickly just about composting, because you mentioned, using some of the mulched leaves, etc. How do you create a good compost bed?
Well, there's
what do you put in it? A little bit of everything. I've heard throw banana peels in it, throw rotting fruit.
A little bit of everything.
Yeah.
I mean, this time of year, when you're cleaning out your vegetable garden, you can put just about any of that in there. You want to add soils, you want to add manures so that it has a consistency breakdown. But it takes about 6 months to turn grass and leaves back into soil. If you have a light you can use a mulching mower just to do composting on your own yard. If you have just a few trees where they just get a light leaf cover, instead of raking those leaves off, just use a mulching mower and mow them back into the ground, because what happens is when you use a steel rake to rake your yard, you actually are removing soils and stuff, and you can be causing a whole other host of problems like surface roots and things like that, exposing large surface roots. A lot of people have silver maples in their yard, and I know you have two silver maples in your own yard.
Well, I did. And they're gone now. They were firewood.
Okay, well, they make great firewood.
Yeah, that's the only plus.
They can be a problematic tree in people's yards. They're extremely fast growing in this area. It doesn't mean they're a bad tree. It just means you have a little more work to do to them. You have to, as they get older, you have to prune them, be more diligent about looking for hollow cavities and things like that. But they can be a great tree, but at the same time they can be a detriment too as they get older. So,
well, one of the things we loved about our neighborhood is, you've heard me mention this before, but I live in Riverly, which is part of Old Worthington, and silver maples everywhere. Everybody in their yard had these silver maples, and it's been over 10 years ago now that I moved in. And it was one of the things that kind of drew me to that neighborhood. I was like, I love all the big trees and all the shade that all the houses have. Well, it's a little different today, because in these last 10 years, it seemed like we hit that window where storms are just wiping these things out left and right. And so the silver maple, I'm going, I will never have a silver maple again, because they seem to break easily. Now, they've been there for over 100+ years. And of course, I say this to my wife. I'm like, wouldn't you know it? The window of time that these trees fall apart or break in a storm is while we're living here, and we have to clean up the mess. And now we're in that pickle of trying to figure out what do we replace, because provided so much shade to our entire house. Now our house is exposed to direct sun, and we're trying to get a rapid growing. So I liked hearing that just a few moments ago of some things you might recommend, but. Gosh, I could use any advice you could give on that one, because I hate the loss of the trees, and I'm looking for that shade. And I have a small maple in my yard that's growing, and that was planted years ago. But I got a long way to go, like a lot of my neighbors do.
What we recommend at Greenscapes is if you have a tree, like even just the ash trees, I mean, if you have an ash tree that hasn't been attacked yet, and you are being diligent as far as treating it and things like that, at some point in time, that tree is going to succumb to the insect. So it's important to establish a new young tree that can replace that. And as that tree grows and your silver maples or your ash tree do succumb to death, then you have something in place that is able to take over and still provide that shade. So sometimes you got to plan ahead, and I know planning ahead for, 10, 20 years seems, kind of unusual, but in a garden, that's what it takes. So
tell me, you haven't mentioned this tree yet, so I'm curious about it. Is the buckeye tree, because as we know, everyone in this town is just nuts for buckeyes. But what about the tree itself? It's our state tree. Is that a good tree to play in a yard? I know they're messy.
It's a phenomenal tree. I have two Fort McNair buckeyes in my own yard. The problem is there is a blight around. It will not kill the tree, but the blight does, unfortunately, in August, put it into dormancy a lot of times if the weather is right. The last couple of years, the leaf blight has come to take the leaves away in August, September.
Tell us what a leaf blight is.
Leaf blight is a fungal infection that unfortunately I'm sure at some point in time over the years just either came overseas with other things or just developed because of numeration of the number of trees. But it's still a phenomenal tree. So.
Okay.
A lot of these diseases, people, or even insect infestations, are really cosmetic. And people get concerned because they see, like a Japanese beetle chewing on a tree or something like that. A lot of times the insects are just, they're going to last a couple of weeks and they're going to go into another stage or disease that would defoliate the tree, but it doesn't mean that the tree is in any way threatened. It's just ugly. You lose the leaves are laying around.
That's just bare. Now, does it have an earlier spring, or is it with everybody else?
It has great flowers in the spring.
Okay.
Yeah, all the buckeyes do, I think.
Yep, absolutely. They come into bloom late April, May, and then go into leaf. And Like the two I have in my yard are red flowering. There's pink flowering. There's white flowering. There's crosses between the horse chestnut, which is also a great tree. So the
buckeye nut is actually a chestnut. Is that right?
It's in the chestnut family. Correct. But
and do they flower every year? Do you get nuts every year on the tree?
The two in my yard are actually non-fruiting. So the Fort McNair buckeye is a non-fruiting species. But then you have the Ohio buckeye, which is a single nut fruiting. There's the yellow buckeye, which is a multiple nut fruiting. All the chestnuts produce chestnuts, and then the horse chestnut, which looks like a buckeye, is one or two nuts per hull. So
all right.
So you do have a little mess, but at the same time, like you said, this town is buckeye nuts.
Yeah. So. Well, before I go nuts, I think we better take a break, and when we come back, we're going to hit some more tips you guys have for us. So stay tuned. You're listening to Dave Fox Home Remodeling Show. We'll be back in just a couple minutes here.
The Dave Fox Home Remodeling Show with your host, Bryce Jacob, on 610 WTVN.
All right, welcome back. It's Bryce Jacob, your host of the Dave Fox Home Remodeling Show. I've got Bill Gerhardt, and I've got Mark Moore. Both of them are from Greenscapes Landscape Company, and they're answering our late-season gardening questions, giving us some good tips here on things that we can be doing in our gardens. Also, just some good trees that we can get shade from, and what we're also doing is taking some of your calls. So I don't want you to be afraid to call us this morning. We're not going to bite, I promise. So the number here is 821-9886, 821-9886, or 800-610-9886. So give us a call with any of your questions that you might have before the season's over, because boy, oh boy, we've only got a couple more weekends left that we can get out in the yard and do some things to prepare for winter. At least the way that winter seems to be hitting us, right, guys?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Gosh, it's come in a hurry. So we did have I had an email come in. I want to have a couple of her questions. This is Mary S. Now, I didn't get her full name, just Mary S. And she emailed me this week, and she had some questions about perennials. And one of the things she doesn't typically do is cut back the perennials in the fall. And she likes to leave seed heads for the birds on some of them, like the black-eyed Susans, and for winter interest as well. And in the spring or summer, when the plants aren't going dormant, if she prunes any of those plants, it will usually give another flush of new growth, and many times around a new flowers, like Shasta daisies. So her questions are this: if I would cut back any of my perennials now, could that encourage any new growth that wouldn't be hardy through the winter?
It is possible to have some flush of growth if we were to have an Indian summer. Fortunately, we've had 2 or 3 freezes now, so most of your perennials should be going dormant. To leave the seed heads up is a phenomenal idea. In my own yard, and I know at Greenscapes, we leave the coneflowers, the black-eyed Susans, the sedums up. There's quite a few birds that will eat the coneflower and black-eyed Susan seeds. The sedum just give you great winter interest when you're looking out at that white blanket of yuck, So you'll see this, red hue seed head off the sedums. The grasses, we leave those up until spring, even though they're brown again when they're blowing in the wind, and they just look great. So it's a great idea to leave perennials up.
And it's okay to leave your roses also, to not prune them down until spring if you want. Now, if you are going to prune your roses, I would wait until sometime in December to make sure they're dormant, because roses like this kind of cool weather, and they are still growing new flushing new growth. So, and Mark's right about the grasses. A lot of people cut them in the fall, and I think the best time for grasses is really the winter time, when the snow gets on the seed heads and they kind of fall over, and they, the birds like to eat the seeds on the grasses.
So she has multiple parts to her question as well, and it says, when is the best time to mulch perennials in the fall?
Well, we want to make sure that the weather stays consistently cool. There are quite a few perennials out there that you do want to mulch over during winter just to give them some added protection. Her Shasta daisies are one of them. They do have a tendency to heave up and out of the ground during the freeze and thaws that central Ohio gets quite frequently. So it'll just give them that little added protection. It's also a great time to do a lot of dividing. Hostas, this is a perfect time to do divisions of hostas and daylilies. So if there's areas that you want to add to your yard, you can take that one that's like 3 feet wide and divide it down to, 20 different plants and move them around, get a little more extension of that flower bed. And
so the fall is a good time to do that with the hostas, you say?
Hostas, daylilies, absolutely.
Okay. Well, we've got that problem with hostas at our house. They just grow and grow and grow, and they're beautiful. I love them, but we could probably spread the wealth a little bit.
Absolutely. Give them to your neighbors. I mean, everybody's got garden friend neighbors that, they see something in your yard and they're like, I'd love to have a cutting of that. And it's a great time to do that. So
good.
A lot of perennials can be divided this time of year. Chrysanthemums, Shasta daisies, even your cone flowers and black-eyed Susans can be divided this time of year. So as long as we don't have frozen soil, you can do all kinds of things like that in the yard.
Excellent. Okay, I'm going to shift our focus just a little bit at this point to technology. Some things going on in the garden right now. Obviously, we talk a lot on this show about just technology and bathrooms and kitchens and throughout the home and what we're doing and seeing in basements these days for home theaters and surrounds. But we're also realizing that Central Ohio business is booming outside. And I know you guys have said this has been a banner year for you, as it has for us as well, with all of the projects that aren't just involved in the indoors, but they're moving to the outdoors. And so how is technology impacting landscape design on the outside, lighting, whatever it may be?
Well, you're right. We're seeing a resurgence of new gardens, people renovating their existing houses, and it's almost back to pre-recession levels for us. But as far as technology, I think just in the design end, we do almost all our designs now on CAD, which means for the client at Greenscapes that, we can make quick changes to the design, modify the design. We can show a 3D SketchUp of the garden, and we can give different views of that garden. So that's the biggest technology change. The other one is, this time of year you get home, it's going to be pretty soon daylight savings time, and it's going to be dark at 5:30, 5 o'clock. And lighting, landscape lighting is such an important part of the landscape this time of year. The lights now are practically all the low voltage LED lights, which means that, you can get tremendous wattage out of those lights for very little cost. The life of those lights are, there's a warranty of 10 years on the light and the bulb now. Which is a big difference from the days of the Malibu type lights that you had to change the bulb every year. The transformers have a 15-year life, so that's tremendous upgrade from where we were before. Very easy to install too, and not a tremendous cost.
I understand some of these lights there's some, I guess, creative lighting, and you're working with Franklin Park Conservatory on a project called Light. Is that right?
Correct. We're a sponsor of Light at Franklin Park Conservatory. One of the things we do in the community, I really, really enjoy what the conservatory does. Light is by Bruce Monroe. He's a international lighting artist from the UK, and just has done a fantastic exhibit down at the conservatory. There's 10 different light installations, and they're spread out throughout the conservatory, throughout the indoor biomes. 2 light installations in the outdoor gardens in the courtyards. So you can go down there Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday night. It runs from 5 to 11 o'clock at night. And the cafe's open and the gift shop's open. There's a couple of Saturday nights coming open that are special engagements, and that's on the 9th of November and again on the 30th of November. So it's worth going down to see. It's very mystic. It's almost like a science fiction type thing. These are all fiber optic lights, and they change with computer animation.
Excellent. Well, I want to talk more about that because obviously those are nighttime. You have to go see them at night.
Correct. They're cool in the daytime too, but the night, of course, is the best.
All right. Well, I'm going to switch to the phones real quick because we got a caller here. And, let's see who this caller and what they want. Hello, good morning.
Well, good morning, sweetheart. How are you?
Oh, boy, it's my wife. I must be in trouble. It's not because of that boxwood comment, is it?
Well, I thought I'd weigh in on our work plan today. So obviously we're going to do some boxwood planting today. But I have a question about hydrangeas and pruning them. I missed the advice on should I prune them now or should I prune them in the spring?
That's a good one for Mark to answer for you.
Okay.
It depends on the kind of hydrangea you have. There's two different kinds.
Okay.
There's a microphylla, and then there's the macrophylla. And the macrophylla you do not want to prune this time of year because you will actually remove the flower head. And then on the macrophylla, you can prune those this year. Those are typically your oak leaf hydrangeas and the larger ones that are more shrub-like, and those you can prune now.
I can. So it's they are limelight. So it's a
microphylla.
Okay.
If you do absolutely need to do some pruning on it, do some light pruning, no more than half.
Okay.
It won't regenerate any new growth this time of year, but it should leave some of those flowering blooms on there. So if you're just trying to wrangle its size or something like that. So.
Okay, great. Well, besides planting those boxwoods finally, we'll leave the hydrangeas alone and maybe split some hostas instead.
There you go.
That sounds like a good plan. Okay, well, thank you for calling.
All right, thanks.
All right, well, I can tell you from my blushing look I have, I don't get called sweetheart by many callers. So, and what a great morning this has been. Okay, well, I think we're going to go to a break real quick while I gather myself, and when we come back, we're going to wrap up with just a few more things that you guys want to talk about. Okay, so make sure you stay tuned, and when we're back, we're going to talk a little bit more about the garden. We'll have time for just a couple more calls. Maybe one of our other wives will call in. Okay, and we are back. Good morning. This is Bryce Jacob, your host for the Dave Fox Home Remodeling Show. I've got a couple gentlemen from Greenscapes Landscape Company, President Bill Gerhardt and arborist expert Mark Moore. We've been talking about our gardens and getting things ready for winter here. So why don't you wrap things up with a few suggestions that you might have for getting our gardens ready for winter?
Oh, my goodness, where do you start? In my opinion, this time of year is much busier than the spring, between putting equipment away and making sure tools are sharpened, leaves are out of the beds, not covering up perennials, letting insects and disease winter over, to making sure your compost pile is ready to go for next spring to add to the gardens. Just a whole laundry list of things, looking for broken branches and plants and trees that need to be pruned out so that tree is ready to go to bed for winter and ready to wake up in the spring and amaze you again. So
one thing we do too at Greenscapes is it's almost time to start feeding the trees and shrubs. You don't want to feed them exactly now because you could spur some growth, but in November we like to go out and deep root feed the trees and the shrubs. And we use an injector type of equipment and use a liquid feed around the trees. You can also put fertilizer over the top in the mulch beds, kind of stir up the mulch a little bit, but follow the instructions. Don't put too much fertilizer down because that can damage also. The other thing that we're really working on, Bryce, is that now's the perfect time to start thinking about next spring and what design changes or what kind of features you want to add to your garden. Typically in the fall, it's a little bit slower time for our designers, so we have a little bit more time to get out and really look at your garden space and discuss what you want to do. And what we advise people to do is go online and to Instagram or some of these websites and look at different ideas that might apply to your garden. Give it to your designer. Greenscapes will send a designer out to meet with the client at their house, do a walkthrough and get their ideas, and we really like to design to what the needs of the client are, much the same as you do.
Yeah.
And you have to design to their needs, not what you want as a designer.
Yeah. And, well, that's interesting because, I think to your point about planning now for spring, it's something that it's really difficult because I think there's a lot of our market that thinks, well, I'll contact them in the spring because there's no way we can make any progress in the winter, the ground's cold. And we get that response a lot from folks who are thinking about doing a room addition. we've had an episode dedicated to this entirely, but we've talked a lot about planning that a room addition. Well, oftentimes what happens and why you guys are such great partners, when we put a room addition on a house, it alters the landscape plan because now the footprint of the home has changed. So the surroundings are changing of the exterior of the home as well. So that's all part of that big master plan. But there are ways of putting an addition on a home. So we get a lot of requests for sunrooms or screened-in porches, and they come in the spring. But you aren't going to enjoy that space probably until the fall, by the time it's all built and finished and ready for you to get in. If you want to enjoy that in the spring, you call now. Now is the time that you need to be calling in and saying, hey, I want to plan that sunroom, that screened-in porch, because it'll be ready for that first beautiful day of spring. If you wait, you're going to miss that opportunity. So, it's a great point. A lot of people go, I had no idea that you could pour foundation in the winter. Well, we build a tent over that, and we put a heater inside. It keeps that concrete, gives the concrete ability to cure, and keeps our guys going. I've often gone out to guys out on the job site that are in their bundled up snowsuits, and you're like, man, you are crazy to be out here. It's freezing. And they're like, I love it. It's peaceful. It's quiet. I don't sweat. It's not too hot. I go inside, and it feels so good when I do go inside and warm up, have my lunch. I love getting back out here. It's just beautiful. And you got to have the right guys that have that mentality, and I'm sure you've got them too.
Well, we've got some real craftsmen at Greenscapes, and I think we counted up the other day, we've got 450 years of experience of people just working at our company only. And, I'm humbled by their abilities. And like you say, they love the outdoors. It's not a big deal to go out when it's 25 degrees, dig a foundation or dig a patio and install it.
Yeah.
That's just what we do. And we don't shut down in the winter. We keep building hardscapes. We plant trees, and we keep going.
Yeah. Well, that's important. We've got to keep our crews going, and business has just been terrific for us. This talk I hear in the media about the economy taking a dip is it's a head scratcher to me, because I'm really watching consumers, the behavior. They're really on board with doing projects indoors and out. It's been one of the best years we've had on record. It actually is the best year we've had on record. So, guys, I wish you the best of luck for the rest of this year, and I really appreciate you being on the show with me this morning.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, and don't forget to go to the conservatory and see light.
Yeah, absolutely. Make sure you make it out there, and you can go online and check that out. Speaking of going online, you can do that and listen to this show or any previous shows that you may have missed by going to DaveFoxRadio.com. Make sure you tune in with us next week from 8 to 9 a.m. right here on WTVN. Have a great week.